Hey, what's up, everybody? I hope everybody's doing great. Welcome to Tuesday night coding night. So, regardless how many people join, I show up and I just slowly work on my portfolio project. And if you guys have questions, maybe I'll have answers. But most of the time, we just get to chat, drink a little bit of tea, hang out. And more importantly, the reason why I do these live streams is for me to continue practicing coding, of course, to be able to comfortably talk about it and practice teaching, but also to show you guys, especially those of you who are just starting out, that when you're starting to code, one of the biggest traps is falling to this idea of tutorial hell. And basically what happens, you just do one tutorial after another tutorial after another tutorial, and you really never get anywhere. And Alexander saying, what's up? Yo, 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 what's up? Hologram, what's up? Good to see you guys. And you fall into this trap of not ever building anything. And it just gets really frustrating because you do a tutorial, you feel like you're accomplishing stuff, but then when you sit down in front of the computer and you try to build something, it just doesn't work out for you. So this is why I do that stream, to show you guys, look, you just got to start. You just got to start building stuff from scratch and fail. So I'm not, like, if you watch these streams, I always make mistakes. Sometimes I get stuck, sometimes I get lost, and that's okay. And this is why I do it, for you guys to know that it's okay. That's the normal part of development, running into bugs and spending a lot of time trying to figure them out. So welcome, and that's what we're going to talk about today. If you guys at any time have any questions, feel free to ask, let me know. And it's so funny, we have a community here. I'll quickly share. If you guys we have a community which is like free right now, and whatever, it doesn't matter. But basically I have a private community where I invite people to join. I've been extremely busy, and so I've been kind of not being involved in my community as much as I want to, but I'm slowly trying to get the change. Some of you guys may know I just switched jobs, and so hopefully my schedule will get a little bit easier, but I want to continue to making more tutorials. But we have this awesome community. If you guys would like to join, just send me an email at codingafter30@gmail.com. The only thing I ask, if you send me a little either portfolio project, your GitHub, or your LinkedIn, so I know that you're actually in it to do work, and then I'll invite you. But this is a great place for you guys to share your thoughts, and it's one cool place. And the reason why I want to show it to you guys is because we have people in our community also building projects, and some of them are way ahead of me, which is fine. But today, I'm going to quickly show you where we are. Oh my goodness, Edward. This means so much to me. Thank you for being here. This is my main channel now. Oh my God, I love you so much. But hopefully I'm providing you some values. So quickly, we're just going to quickly go over. So I decided to build a project very slowly, and the first thing I did is I chose the technology that I wanted to do, and I decided on the front end to use React.js, REST API, style components, and Tailwind. And then for backend, I took the easy way out. And if you're just starting out your development journey, I suggest you guys do too, is instead of trying to create a backend yourself from scratch, using a CMS, and I prefer Strapi because it's the best, and we're using REST. And for database, we're using Postgresql, and we're going to use Cloudinary to host our images, even though I didn't implement it yet. And our site is going to be deployed on DigitalOcean and Netlify. And I currently already have the basic site deployed on DigitalOcean. What I recommend whenever you start a project, make the basic app basically connect your front end and back end, or just your front end, whatever it is, and deploy it right away. So this way you could get a habit of continuously deploying new features as you get them. And so my back end is deployed on DigitalOcean, and my front end is deployed on Netlify. And if you go to our Netlify front end, you see this application. And I'm going to quickly walk you through it. I'll also show you the link here as well, so if you guys want to check it out. And let's see quickly. And Alexander, that's a great question. How do you come up with coding projects? I feel like people want to build something you're passionate about. I don't know what I'm passionate about. Haha. Yeah, no, totally get it. And I will talk about this in a little bit more. Let me just quickly do a quick review, an overview of the project. And thank you so much. As I always insightful, I enjoy your broadcast, and hopefully you're going to have fun. So right now you can go to that link, and so far what do we have? We have a working login. So if I use my test user account, and the password is test user, not very original. When you click sign in, it will take you to the dashboard. Currently, user section is hard coded. We didn't touch it yet, but we implemented our teams. Teams are being populated from our database, so we could create a team. I'm just going to do this right now just for the sake of example. We're able to create team. Let me make that screen a little bit bigger. We're able to create team, and if you're like, oh, I made a mistake, we could edit the name, second team, and cool. And so we have our edit function, we have our create team function, we have our delete function, we have our logout function, and so that's where we are right now. And today we're going to look at implementing sign up. And it's very interesting because the way Strapi handles sign up, they usually just from out of the box, they just say enter your email and password. But as you can see here, we're asking for the first name and last name. And out of the box, Strapi can't handle that. But the good news about Strapi that you're able to extend the functionality, and we're going to take a look. And don't worry if you guys not able to follow completely. The idea is just to understand the big picture so you could see some of the pieces that are involved when you're building an application. And the second thing, I'm here for you to ask questions. So if something doesn't make sense, because sometimes, like a lot of times, it doesn't make sense to me, but I'll love to tell you those questions. So to quickly show you, once I picked the stack for my project that I wanted to use, what I did is I created simple mockup for my UI. I did my login page, I did my sign up page, and my Teams view. So if you look at our application here running locally, so I have my Teams view, and I created our sign in and sign up view, right? So I first started with simple pages that I know I'm gonna need. Once that was done, I for my first sprint, my first MVP, I decided not to go all out and crazy. I wanted to make sure the scope of it is small enough that I keep motivated to continue working on my project. And once I complete everything that I started initially, then I could add new features. So for initial functionality, all I wanted to do is for us to be able to log in. We're able to do that. I wanted to be able to log out. We are able to do that. That's why that's green. We're able to create team, delete team, update, and show the team. That's all done. So what we have left to do today is creating an account and making sure we're able to add name and add job title. I'm going to do it later because I do want to have update portfolio features. So here we're going to do add last name. And then we also want to implement send email with Strapi, so when someone creates an account, they'll get an email, and I could get an email that I have a new user. And so they get a welcome email like, hey, thank you for joining, and I'll get like, hey, John Smith just joined your project, and that'll be pretty awesome. So this is kind of for this sprint what we have left to do. And before I even started building anything, I just identified like the data types. So for my user, we need ID, first name, last name, job title, email, and password. And for our team, we need ID, name, description, and user relation. And you could see all of that when you start using Strapi. If you're not familiar with Strapi, Strapi is open source CMS that I love. I've been using it for many, many years. I enjoy it so much. And it allows you to, like it says here, design APIs fast and manage content easily. So what you get out of the box, and it takes literally 5 minutes to set up, is you get this amazing UI. And as you could see, I have my content types here where I have my teams and users for my backend. And I have this amazing content type editor, which allows me to create that content type, and it will automatically create RESTful endpoints for me to be able to call to the API. And we could talk more about it, but right now I'm just gonna kind of give you a big picture. And this is so far our application. So today we're gonna work on signing up. But before I do that, let me take a look at the question. And the first question, how do you come up with coding projects? Feel like people want to build something you're passionate about and don't know what passionate about. So that's great, because to be honest with you, I fell into that same category. I had no idea what to build, so I built a lot of like different apps. But what I realized, to get a job, there's a basic sense of knowledge that you have to know. And if I had to briefly kind of say what it is, I would say you need to understand how full CRUD functionality works, like create, read, update, delete. You don't need to implement it completely from backend yourself. I'm using Strapi in that case, but you need to have an API, Strapi, that allows you to at least practice those concepts as a front-end developer. So you need to be able to create, read, update, delete. You also have to understand this idea of user, meaning you have an authenticated user that signs up, and based on either if they're logged in or if they're not logged in, or whatever permissions you decide, they have access to certain content. So you have to understand in the basic level permissioning and what that means. And Strapi, I found, is a great way for us to learn all those concepts, start learning backend development without really diving into backend development. Because to be honest with you, if I started to learn full stack development right from the start, it would take me much longer to get a job. So if you want the quickest way, and there's many ways, but if you want the quickest way to get hired, in my opinion, is learn JavaScript, learn React, and be able to create React applications that have authentication and crowd functionality against an API, even the one that you don't write yourself. And that's why I'm using Strapi. And in terms of coming up with ideas, I literally I followed this channel called Coder Foundry, and they build a bug tracker. And I thought, wow, that's a kind of cool idea. And so I was going to build a bug tracker, but I decided, you know what? That's their thing. They're already doing it. So I decided what project will allow me to do all those things that I want to do as a developer. So we're making a project management. And the reason why I tell you need to have CRUD and authentication and understand how all that works, because this is exactly what I do on my day-to-day basis at work. So everything that I'm doing on this application is everything that I do at work. And that allowed me to build an application at work that we are really close to putting to production, which is like super exciting. And before we continue, and have you been running into content security policy errors at all, or does Strapi handle all of that? So you could actually, and we'll do that not in this video, but in a couple of videos, we will actually show you how you could create security policies very easily with Strapi. You're basically able to write a function that will be checked before it hits your controller, and if it doesn't pass the test, it'll never hit the controller. So it's a very easy and convenient way to secure your application, and Strapi does make it super easy. And Luke, what's up? How's work going? And Jose, what's up? Good to see you. So we're gonna jump right into it. So the first thing I'm gonna do, and at any point you guys have questions, just let me know. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of look at what we want to do. And what I want to do is I want to be able to actually fill in this. Let me share my screen here. What I want to do is I want to be able to fill in this form, click like submit, and I want to create a user. Before we hook up this form, we could test all that functionality using Postman. And so what I want to show you first is quickly kind of when you start with Strapi, right? What's cool about it, you get authentication and creating user or signing up like right out of the box. So if you go to their docs, roles and permissions, they kind of show you some of the ways to do it. And so let's see here. This is how to make authenticated requests. This is talks about configuring JWT token. So it shows you registration. So login we got right here. So let's look at the registration here. So basically, in the most basic sense, what we need to do is we need to make a post request to our register endpoint, and we need to provide username, email, and password. And what this is going to do is going to hit that endpoint, it's going to do some stuff, and we're basically going to get back a JWT token that will allow us to log in, and we are able to use that token to make requests. And so what I want to do, and hold on a second here, I got to figure something out. Interesting. I'll figure that out later. Yep. Yeah, I was just looking that my face disappeared, but that's fine. That's okay. You don't need to see my face. You could see my face when I switch here. And so, Idrissa, what's up? Good to see you. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of walk through this example. So in our application, in our API, we have an endpoint, which is at, make sure that I'm sharing my screen, localhost 1337 API auth local register. And so what this endpoint expects, it expects us to send this information, username, email, and password. And if we send that information and it's correct, it will return back to us a JWT token and our user. And so to show you an example how this works, here's our endpoint that we want to hit. And let me make my screen bigger so you guys could see. And basically what we would do is we would make a post request. We will send a JSON object, and I'll show you this in code in a little bit. we will send our JSON object that will be processed on their backend, and we should get a return back. So let me click send here. And notice how I get back JWT token. I get my user. And then for first name and last name, we get null. Title, we get null. Some of the information is not set, which is okay, but we'll talk about that in a second. And so when I go back to my Strapi backend here, if I click onto users, content manager users, and this is why I love Strapi. You're able to see all the changes that you're making off your front-end application. And that's why I recommend it, because for those of us who are starting out or just focusing on front-end, we have this amazing UI to be able to see the changes. So if I refresh, so here's the login I created. So I have a username and the email set and the password set, but you could see the last name and title are not set. They're not set. And you can't, out of the box, Strapi doesn't support this, right? It doesn't let you set additional fields when you are making authentication. So normally people would just want to accept the username and the password to log in, or they want to accept your email and password to log in. So if we come here to my application, I'm expecting that people will to create a user also give their first name and last name. I want to make it more personal. But this is not supported out of the box with Strapi. And so what you have to do is you actually have to write some backend logic. And again, we're going to look at some backend code. And if some of it doesn't make sense to you, ask questions, don't worry about it. But I just wanted to give you the big picture that sometimes when you're writing an application or you're working with an application like Strapi, some of the features that you want might not exist. And the beautiful part about Strapi, the awesome part about Strapi, that it allows you to extend application and create custom features because it is based on Node. It's based on JavaScript, and it's using Koa framework underneath to allow you to write Node code and extend its functionality. So that's what we're going to do. And again, at any time, if you guys have questions or something doesn't make sense, let me know. And so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to jump in and kind of show you the Strapi repo here. So again, follow me the best as you can. And if you get lost or confused, don't worry about it. Let me know. I'll help you guys out. So this is the actual code from Strapi that my application is based on, that I'm using. And they have, I believe, on their packages, they have plugins. So the way Strapi is broken into the core function, they have their core functionality, but then they have their plugins which extend functionality of Strapi. And one of those is, GraphQL plugin, user permissions plugin, bunch of other ones. And basically, this is a way for them to keep everything modular to be able to add functionalities into the core. And this is why Strapi is awesome, because anyone could add additional plugins to extend, and I'm not sharing my screen, which is good to know, and allow us to extend Strapi. So let me back up here for a second. So this is the repo of all of code of Strapi. And if you go to packages, it will have some of the core plugins that you have. And what's awesome, I hope you could see, we have plugins folder, then it has user permissions. This is going to become important in a second. Then they have, folder called server, and then they have folder that have your API will usually have controllers, and controllers are what are tied into routes. So whenever we set a post request or get request or whatever request, it's going to hit a route, and that route is going to trigger a controller logic, right? And then we have controllers for authentication, and I'll show you one in particular here. It should say register, reset password, connect, forgot password. We're just scrolling here. So we have here line 277. It says register. So this is a controller. And basically what happens when we make a post request to API auth local register, we're going to that route, and that route is going to trigger that controller. Notice how the basic expectation of Strapi. It's expecting username, email, and password. That is it. And so when we hit the register controller here, right, it's going to do a bunch of stuff, but we validate the parameters. Again, don't worry about all this crazy stuff. I'm just going to quickly, and notice the first thing it checks is check if the thing that you provided is proper email format. If it is, it will check, it will see, okay, if you have valid email, it will set the email to lowercase. If not, it will say, please provide valid email address. And so like, if I try to, let's say, make a request here and I do something like this is obviously not proper email address, hit send. Let me change this one, not username. I switched the wrong one. Username could be anything. We were talking about email, but let's say I do this and I change this. So that's not a properly formatted email. I hit send. Notice how it says email must be valid, right? We have validation error. And if you're probably wondering, where's that coming from? It's coming from the controller where it's doing the validation and returning like, hey, that's not a valid email. And so it could either say like, if emailers already exist, we saw that error. If not a proper email, it says, please provide a proper email. So this is where we're hitting that logic, we're hitting that controller, and we're able to do that. So the short of the story here right now, this controller here that you see in Strapi only expects identifier, password, and email. So you cannot set, let's say, first name and last name here. You just can't do it, right? All you could do is just authenticate with a username and email. And so what we need to do, we need to override this controller. So basically we need to take this register controller, and this is exactly what I did when I'll show you in the code, and we have to override it. So I copied this and I went into my Strapi application. This is my backend here, and Strapi gives you, and we could look at more documentation to make it easier. I'll take a look in the questions just a second to say what's up. But Strapi gives you this amazing ability to go into the extension folder, and what you do is you have to name the folder exactly what it's named in Strapi. So it's called user permissions, and you add all these additional folders that I need, which I'll explain later. But the most important part, in Strapi server, you're able to add what you want to overwrite. In this case, I'm not even overwriting. I'm creating a new controller, register user. And so this here will have custom logic that will allow me to not only register with username, email, and password, but it also allows me to add our first name and last name. And I'll show you this in just a second. In code. But first, let me come back here, take a look at the questions. And I know, listen, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask me. So we said hi to, in Greece, we say hi to Ken. Ken, what's up? How you doing? Alexander, why JavaScript and React for building projects for a job? You've spoken about Code Foundry before, and I believe they feel pretty passionate about Net, C, Stack. Is JavaScript and React easy to learn? You know, to be honest with you, I'll tell you this way. If you only focus on ASP.NET and C#, you will get a job, right? That's one avenue and one way. And I really love the guys at Code Foundry. And I actually, my first job I got as a React developer, and then part of that job, I had to also work on the back end using C#. We have Luke in the chat here. He's a big C# guy. And so nothing wrong with that. I'm just, like you said, Code Foundry is passionate about C#, ASP.NET. I am really passionate about JavaScript and Node. I feel it's very flexible. And what I like about it is because if you're just starting out, like if you're going to learn ASP and C#, you still need to learn JavaScript. You still need to learn HTML. You still need to learn CSS. So I feel like starting with JavaScript first and working on React, it's a very popular framework. A lot of jobs out there. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm saying there's jobs available for both. And no matter what you commit to, you're going to get a job. What I'm saying is that pick one. Don't do both. So I chose to focus React, Node.js, JavaScript, 100%. Luke decided to do C#, ASP.NET, 100%. And you know what? We both have jobs. And so whatever path you take, if you decide to go with Python, that's perfectly fine too, right? And so what I'm saying is that you need to pick one route, not all routes, and take and work on that. So either one will work, but you just have to stick with it until you get it. So I wouldn't say one is easier than the other. They all have their perks. And if you have any more questions, let me know. But with that being said, let's kind of come back here, and I'm going to show you my code again. So basically, the general idea, I needed to create a new controller that will allow me to extend the functionality of and override the original register controller that comes with Strapi. And so again, basic idea is, if you're working on the front end, you need to understand that you're going to make a API call to an endpoint. That endpoint is tied to a controller. Once that controller is hit, it's going to fire through the logic here, and you will have to write some code to check the logic depending what you want to do. And once that is done, you'll be able to fire back a request. In this case, it's going to send back the user object and JWT token. And that's from the big point transition here. So as we look at my current Strapi application here, and I want to show you here. So originally, if you go to settings, roles, and again, don't worry about the minor details. Think about hitting an API that fires a controller. So we have a bunch of controllers. So register user is the one that I created myself. Why did I create this register user controller? Because it did not have the custom functionality that I wanted. And I'm going to kind of turn this off for now, save. So standard is the register controller, which only takes identifier, like a username, an email, and then the password to create a registered user. But if you pass any additional data, like a first name, last name, it doesn't know what to do with it. And I'll quickly show you this in this example here. So we're calling our register controller, which comes out of the box from Strapi, and it only takes in a username, email, and password. And I believe I deleted that user. Let me double check, make sure, because it's going to say user exists if he exists. So let me go here. Let me delete this user. So check this out. We go back here, and if I pass the required data, I click send. Oh, it has to be a valid email. So let me do @email. Great that .io, whatever you want to call it. I'm glad that, you know, this works. And when I click send, notice what we get. We get our JWT token and we get our user object. And that came from our controller. Right, this is our controller, and notice how we got back our JW token and our newly created user object. And did I put some console logs here? No, I didn't put any console logs in here. That's okay. And so basically, this is what we would get from the regular controller. But if I decide to add, you know, first name, let's do a little test. And if I try to add a last name, oh man, the pressure is real. Can't type to save my life. First name, that looks correct. And I click send. Oh, I forgot to put a comma here. That's why it's complaining. And if I hit send, let me actually erase that user so we know that we created a new user. And so notice how I am literally passing first name and last name, something that we need to have, that I want to have whenever someone logs in. I want to be more personable. What I want when people create their first user, I get an email that someone new joined the community, and they get an email saying, welcome, thank you for joining our community. And I want to be able to say, Paul, welcome to blah, 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 blah. So I need the first name and the last name. But when I hit send, right, it looks like it works, right? We get the JW token, we get the user, and we get the first name and last name as return. But let's see if it was inside our callback here. Users. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let me back up here. I think that, oh, yes, I get it. Never mind. Hold on a second. Let me go back here. I'm like making the request to that same endpoint, that the one that works, that adds the first name and last name. But let me erase this. Delete. Confirm. Oh, that makes sense. Yep. Hold on a second. So I'm still hitting the custom register controller because I have to disable one, because it's going to that custom register controller because the endpoint is the same in the route. So let me come back here. That's why it worked. So let me go to Strapi here. I'll show you what I mean. So we deleted the user settings. Hold on, did I save it here? Registered, save. Let me see this one. Register user. Copy it. Let me go back there. Actually, let me keep that. I think I might be using the same route for both controllers, which is not something I should do. All right. So let me look at my custom code here. Let me kind of do this. I'm just reviewing this just to double check. Role, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's register user. Okay. Oh, maybe because I didn't even restart my server, so it's still like kind of doing the old stuff. Let me restart that. Anyway, let me look at the comments. Yep. Anyway, since you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to keep at it. And by the way, I hope you guys are also working on projects. And let me know in the chat like what projects you guys are working on. And if you guys ever want to share your portfolio and do a like a portfolio review, let me know. I'd love to do that and give you my thoughts and opinions for what they're worth. And so let's try that again. We reset. Go back here. Register user. That'll be interesting if they change the implementation where now it allows you to add the first name and last name, because I did update, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't. So let's see this. First name. So let's do send. Title. That's interesting. So now I'm curious. Now I'm very curious. So what's happening, it is doing the behavior that it used to not let me before, where basically it would only take identifier, it would only take the user, so email, username, and password. So let me check something. And something could be with the fact that, so no, the path and the routes look good. So register user, blah, 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 blah. We get the params. But it's not even hitting this one. I want to find out. So sometimes when you're coding, you know how sometimes you have the node modules folder, and a lot of times, here, I'll show you here by example. This is actually kind of a cool tip here. So this is right here. You have your Strapi application, and you have the files that you're working in, but sometimes you're working with different packages, and you are you're kind of utilizing those packages. And sometimes when you're testing something, you're like, well, how's that work? Or why doesn't it work? And sometimes what you could do is you could actually go to the node modules and see if you could find that package that you're using where that code lives. And there's a lot of packages here. And then you could try to troubleshoot and figure stuff out. Now, what I might have done, which is probably stupid, I might have overwritten the controller literally inside node modules without thinking about it. And that's why it's getting the behavior that I feel it's doing, which is kind of silly. You should never make changes in node module packages when extending stuff, because whenever you update the packages, it'll most likely override it. And so that's not what you want. I'm just kind of looking. STUV. Yeah. So, by the way, guys, this is like a lot of times, like what happens is like you run into an issue or you get an unexpected behavior, and then you try to figure out and troubleshoot. And the cool thing about it, like a lot of people think it's like when you're coding, it's like you just smooth sailing all the way and things work as expected and things are fine. And as you can see, that's not how it is. And so now I'm like trying to find where that package lives. Okay. Strapi, user permissions, admin. We want to go into, wait, is it admin, plugin, user permissions, server. We go to server. We go to controllers, and we have auth. And this is kind of what I showed you guys earlier. And so now we could kind of take a look. And blah, 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 blah. Reset password. And so this is where, like, one good lesson here for you guys. I'll jump to the questions just a moment, guys. A lot of times, one of the best ways to learn or to discover new things is to actually do what I'm doing here now, is looking through node modules, finding the package that you're using and figuring it out. And so here, we're going to do a console log. So we should have access to the params. And we should be able to see like what we are getting when we are doing something. And what the fun? Because for me, I'm kind of curious like why it's allowing me to pass data that it shouldn't pass. Right? It's only checking for username, email. So we're going to do a little console log here. We're going to play a little game. But before we play that game, actually, let me play the game first. Let me go back here. Let's click send. Email's already taken. Let me do another email. Click send. Error occurred during creation. Let's see here. Validation of this attribute must be unique. That happened in blah blah. Now it's complaining. Hold on a second. Let's go back here. And then I'll get to questions, I promise. Let me back up here. I'll keep that. Readers at email. Oh, username probably needs to be unique too. So let me delete the username so just I'm not confused here. And by the way, this is how like you learn to code. It's literally through suffering, through making mistakes, try to figure stuff out, and troubleshooting. Like this is literally how you do it. And I'm gonna get to all the questions, guys, in just a minute. I see a bunch of you guys. And Sharon, you're not late to the party. Let me drink a little bit of tea. So let's try this again. Let's go to Postman. And in theory, hold on, I'm just gonna simplify because test user, and then let's just do this test user at email.com. And so password will be Strapi. I click send. Yeah, so it's allowing us to add this. This was not the behavior before, hence why I created a custom controller. Unless this is going to the custom controller, and we'll be able to check by seeing the console log. Let's see here. So that's interesting because we don't have a console log here. I'm assuming that we are hitting the custom controller that allows us the functionality, which is already weird for me. Like let me do this. Go back here. I'm just curious. At this point, I'm like already curious. So like I have no idea what's happening. Let's delete this. Let's delete this. Save. Let's try this. Let's refresh the server. I promise I'm going to get to the questions in just a second. And npm run develop. I am curious about one thing. I think I know what an issue could be, and this is something that you probably would be like, why? How's this even possible? But we'll double check in a second. So let's send again. So that's forbidden because we're not giving permission, so that's fine. And this is like basically like you gotta just troubleshoot and tweak things and play with things. And I just wanna, before I take my attention away, I just wanna, so I'm testing each controller individually. So this should be the controller in the node modules. Save. Let's go back to our code. Restart the server again. Run develop. So register. Yep. Send. Oh, email's already taken. So let's do test user 1. Send. Error occurred in the creation. So this attribute must be unique. That means we have test user already taken. So at least we're hitting the right controller. That's a good sign. So let's do test user 1. Send. First, you're able to add, and I'm assuming that let's see here. So we're able to do that. We get our params. Our params, we get first name, last name. And then we keep going. So validate registered body. Let's go to the definition. Okay, let me answer some questions, and then I'll come back to this because sometimes, like, going down the rabbit hole, we'll be back here. So let me look at the questions first. Anyway. Okay. So we talked about Alexander's first part of his question. Okay, hologram. Let's come to your question. Paul, how much database knowledge did you have when you got your first job? Very good question. So when I first got my job, prior to getting that job, I spent a lot of times building applications with Firebase and some of them with MongoDB, which is like, I would say, a little bit easier to get into. And there's a lot of Firebase tutorials. And my first job was a front-end React developer job at this company called VersaSuite, and their backend was done with ASP.NET and C#. And so, like, my boss told me, look, you got hired because you know React, but if you want to keep your job here, you need to start learning how to work with a backend. So I started diving into ASP.NET and C#, and to my surprise, behold, they were using an SQL database, right? And so I knew nothing about SQL databases, and I literally had no idea how to make queries, how to check the database against the requests that I make in the front end to make sure that they actually went through. And believe it or not, you might be working as a front end developer, but you should be familiar with database basics, like doing some basic queries or being able to in the database of your choice. And this is why I recommend Postgresql, SQL to start with, even like SQLite, because that's what most companies use, and you should be comfortable understanding how relational databases work, and at least know how to be able to find where the database is and how to be able to make queries. Even though if you don't know what the query is, you could look it up, how to write a query to check a certain table for certain information, just so you know you were able to update the data. That's like super important. So what I would say for all of you who are starting out, you should be familiar with the concept of what a database is. And if you're going to start with a database, make sure you do some SQL related database. SQL, PostgreSQL is just the easiest and to start with. I know there's bajillion tutorials. Everybody loves MERN. Everybody loves Mongo. Even bajillion tutorials with Firebase, using like the Firebase database, non-relationship database. It's all good, but majority of jobs, 90% of the jobs that I saw, they all want you to work with Postgres and SQL. So definitely learn the basics, understand like where to look stuff up, and see how you could see where the data goes. That's what I would say for that hologram. Doesn't have like the basics, something you could learn over like 2 weeks of if you take one class on Udemy or just find a bunch of videos on YouTube. Ken asks, which one of you choose between React Straps, Semantic UI, React Tailwind, or React for React applications? So what I would start no basic HTML, CSS, right? Well, this is particular to CSS. So no CSS and no like Sass, just to be comfortable with it. Second, learn Bootstrap, because there's a lot of common places that still learn Bootstrap. When I say learn Bootstrap, just know the basics. And then pick up a component library called React Bootstrap, because it's based on Bootstrap, very common. But then another common, the ones that I use is Semantic UI and then Material UI, or now it's called MUI. So what I would say, you don't have to do all of them. Just if you wanted to kind of cover your bases, because it's very common at the workplace, you could learn CSS, learn Sass, and then for a React framework, pick Material UI, because that's super common as well. And then for fun, you could look at Tailwind for React applications. So will something like this help you get a job on finished project with good documentation, or should you show finished project in interviews? If you have a finished project, that's what you want. And this is what I say, keeping a scope small. So I'll give you an example. The last job I applied for, I had a completed application, which was, it didn't have all the features, but it wasn't not working. Like, you were able to do all the things that you needed to do. You were able to log in. You were able to add a project, you were able to add a bug to that project, you're able to delete it and update it, and you're able to log out. So in theory, you can use that, and you could sign up as a user. So you could use that application completely, and it's a complete application. Yes. Is it missing features? Yes. But is it deployed? Yes. Can you do the basic functionality that's in the app? Yes. Can I talk about it if someone asks me questions about it? Yes. And then another question I got in my interview, based on what you did in this current project, what would you do differently? And you should have an answer, like be like, if I had more time, I would have done this, this, and that. So what I would say, you would definitely want to have a completed application that works. So if it has less features, I would say it's better than non-completed application. And this application that I'm building now, I'm building it from the standpoint to kind of showcase, what coding actually looks like in real life. It's not as glamorous as people making out, and to showcase that, it's not as exciting at times. I mean, it is exciting, but sometimes you're just doing boring stuff. Like right now, I'm trying to figure out why the feature that shouldn't work is working. That's blowing my mind right now. And that would be like the most important part. But the reason why I do this live stream, Alexander, this is what I would tell you, is your goal should be able to to talk comfortably about your application. For instance, like if you're looking at the code, let me kind of switch my screen here. Like if you look at my code, this is what I say, like doing tutorials sometimes is not helpful. You look at the code and I have a bunch of stuff here, right? You should be able to pick any line from me and be like, what is this input component do? And why is it called input? What like, is it a library you're using? Let's see here. No, it's not. It's a my own styled component that I made. So this input, even though it's a component, I didn't pull it from a library. I made it, and it's found in styled base input. And here's the component, right? And that's the styles for the component, and this is the actual component, and its implementation. So I created that component myself. And what does it do? It takes a bunch of props, ID, name, error type, placeholder, label. Based on the props that it gets, it will either show the label if you pass it or it won't. Then we have the input base component, which handles the input. We have our input error component, which basically shows an error if the component is incorrect. But basically what I'm getting at is you should be able to comfortably talk about the code that you wrote very well. And you should have some documentation as well. I think that's a good point. And I didn't do enough writing documentation when I started out. But yeah, definitely want to have a finished project. And the follow-up question is, if you would show this project in an interview, would you talk about your current sticking points and what you're doing to resolve them in an interview as well? 100%. So the first thing I would do is I would break it down like this. So I like how you said that. And the way I would break it down, I would say like, this is what I did, this is why I did it, and this is completed. I wouldn't say I had sticking points, right? Like right away, I would just say, here's the completed application. This is the features that it has. And then I would say like this, if I had more time, what I would have done is I would have changed this, because the way I implemented here, I think there's a better way. And if I could go back, I would refactor. And the reason why I say to do it this way, because at the end of the day, you could keep refactoring your application and never have something to show for it that it's completed or deployed. People actually want to see a deployed application first, because if the application is in progress and not built, right, it's an application that you can't sell to the user. So it's better to have a application that's missing features. I'll put in a very, very plain example for those of you guys who play video games. Think of Battlefield 2042 and the bugs and the broken stuff that it has. Yeah, it could have been a cool game, but it got so many people upset because of all the bugs, or Cyberpunk 2042, whatever. They're all the same. Had a bunch of bugs. They released it too early. They should have not had certain features and no bugs. They should have had a working application with less features. That would have been way better for the users, because at least they wouldn't be running into problems. So what I would say for an interview is better to make a small application which works, and then if you have more time, you could always add new features. But you should be able to have an application that works, it doesn't break, and you should be able to talk about it very easily. And then Northern Chimp saying hello, and late to the stream, hello from Florida. What's up, Brian? You're in Florida hanging out? That's fantastic. So let's come back to the nightmare I'm having where we have mystery feature that shouldn't work works. And we're trying to figure out why. So normally I shouldn't have been able to pass a username, first name and last name, and add additional data. But for now, like, it's letting me do that. So as I could see here in my console log, why is it so small? I'm passing first name and last name, and it's letting me send it and add it to the user object, which is, I don't know if that's the entailed behavior, because why should I, because that means you could make a request and you could pass whatever the heck you want. Like whatever the hell you want. And so that shouldn't be like that. I shouldn't be able to pass whatever the hell I want. So we have so it seems like here in this code here, and this is the Strapi code in the node modules. Basically, whatever params I pass, it's going to accept it, and it's going to add it here, which is, like, if it's in the database, I guess it's okay, but why if you don't want people to set a certain field? Like, why if I don't want to be able to give people permission to set their first name and last name or additional data? Because what it means now, if you guys are able to follow, because I don't even follow myself, but what this means now, if you look at our user object, we have our test user, we have last name field, we have title, we have invite message, we have invite status, we have confirmed, we have password. Like, why if I don't want to allow to change the invite status unless the controller expects it? But right now, the way that's set up, the controller is actually letting me do whatever that wants, because basically what it's doing, and it's taking all of our params, right? It's taking all of our params and it's adding all that data to the user. So what we're going to do, we're going to fix this. So then I could go back and we could talk about if this is the right behavior or not, but we're going to change it up here to not allow us to add first name and last name. So we're only going to allow params to add only the username, email, and password. So there's a couple ways to do it. We could make a new object. Let's do it this way. And we're going to call it user data. And it's going to be blank. Well, it's not going to be blank. It's going to take username, if I could spell. And username is going to be params.username. It's going to take password. It's going to be params.password. And it's going to take email, params.email. And instead of passing params, we're going to pass user data. And let's see if that's going to fix the behavior that I was looking, which is I didn't want to pass additional information that you did not ask or approve in the controller. And I might have like overwritten this, and I could take a look, but literally I don't see why it should allow you to pass additional arguments that the control doesn't expect. So we're going to fix it this way for now. I'm sure there's better ways to handle. So now what we should be able to only pass is this. So let's check it out. Let's restart our server. If you guys have questions, let me know. I would love to answer your questions. So let me go to here, users. Let me delete all the additional users that we don't need. Delete. So now we're going to test again. And we're going to first do it this way. We're gonna comment that out. So in theory right now, we should only pass username, email, and password. So let's click send. unexpected token in JSON position 86. It's going to be fun with errors. Now that shouldn't make no difference. What is happening? These are cryptic unexpected token position 86. Let me console log my params, and then let me console log data, user data. I could set breakpoints, by the way. They'll be like way smarter, you know, but we're using console log. So we're going to see what the params are, and then we're going to see what user data is. We're going to compare the two, because I would assume that's where our issue's happening. Let's restart the server. And this is how glamorous programming is. This is literally what you guys do, is you have this good idea. Like I had this good idea, like I'm going to show you how to create a custom controller by extending Strapi, which you could still talk about, but then we find an issue, and then that I didn't even anticipate. What's funny, that issue wasn't coming up a week ago, so exciting. So let's fire this request again. So syntax error again. And so we're not even hitting any of these console logs. So I'm assuming it doesn't like this. I'm assuming it hates the comments. So let me delete the comments. It's all these things that you were like, it shouldn't matter. But at the end of the day, all the little stupid things matter. So let's send again. So apparently it didn't like that. So here we go. So notice, yes, finally, we did it by doing the thing that I didn't expect the controller to do. So notice now, in the regular controller, we're not getting the first name, we're not getting the last name, we're not getting the title. We're only getting, and the only reason it worked because I didn't pass it here. Like, I get it. But look, that should be null. So now what we're going to do, we're going to try to pass fields that in this particular controller you shouldn't be able to pass. First name, you shouldn't be able to pass. Blah. And then last name, you shouldn't be able to pass. You shouldn't be able to pass, right? Blah. Whatever. So now I'm going to submit. Let me delete the previous user that I created here. And we should all see again that this test user should not have those new additional params. Like we don't, like I don't want, this controller should not allow you to pass first name and last name. And so we're going to check it out. So I click send, and bam, look at this. First name, last name is null. Why is that? Because we don't want this controller to pass those. And in theory, as I recall, and I must have like messed with this controller inside. This is why you shouldn't mess with controller inside node modules, because if you're using a third-party service or whatever, you shouldn't mess with stuff. You should be able to override it in your code, but not inside the actual node modules, because if they update, they will override it anyway. But in this case, I must have done something in the past where I got the email functionality working, and it was not intended. And I'm kind of curious. I'm going to compare to see like what this code looks like versus what it is in the Strapi repo, actually. But the point, I'll come back to that in a second, is that we should not pass any additional params. And so now, like, it doesn't matter what I pass. It's only going to use username, password, and email to create a user. So I'm going to comment that out because we know this is the case now. Beautiful. So we have one controller that doesn't let you pass that. And I am curious, like in Strapi documentation, I bet I must have overwritten the controller, or they must have, I'm not saying they did changes, but let's see here. So this is the regular register controller. This is literally the code. I should be able to, by the way, copy and paste this into that node module folder. And in theory, it should be fine. And we could see what changes we had. So let's go back here. Go to our node modules auth. And paste it here. Obviously, we're not going to be able to see the changes because node modules, like, it's not being saved. But I'm just curious now. We have same number of lines. I swear to God, before it didn't let you pass whatever. It only allowed you to pass the user data. And it looks like it's the same. And you're basically able to... I bet they updated it. So if people added additional params on the user object, they just wanted them to be able to pass it easily. You know? Because the change that I made, I kind of brought it back to this idea where, no, you can't pass anything. You could only pass the username, the password, and email. So for now, I'm going to keep it like this. Why? Because now we could see why, or in what case would you create a custom controller if, let's say, out of the box, Strapi doesn't allow you to do a certain feature. So even though now they allow you to do this, and I don't think before they did. So let me close the node modules. So in the initial controller here, and I'm going to show you here. So notice how we're no longer able to pass additional data, right? We can't because the controller doesn't allow us. So if I create another user, test user 2 with a username 2, and let me make sure my server is running. Yep, it's running. So when I hit send, even if I pass first name, and I know I'm like taking forever to explain this, and let me know if it's not making sense. Like, smash the like button if none of this makes sense. And if it does make sense, man, I got a negative button because it's making too much sense. I'm assuming it's making too much sense. That's why I got the negative. Okay, so we press blah, and look at this. No, right? And it's not giving you a certain functionality. So you don't want to go into node modules and override a controller in node modules, right? Because that's a bad way to fix something. Because anytime you update your node modules and you update your packages or like whatever, it might override that code that you wrote there. And so with that being said, even if you might make changes there and they will work, eventually when something happens and you override it or whatever, it will break your application again. So in this case, what we going to do instead, we created a custom controller, and the endpoint for that, it's not register. Let's take a look here. So I'll show you where it is. We go to settings, we go to roles. I love when people like have the time to hate stuff. It just makes me so happy because it means like you have so much time that instead of adding like feedback, you're just like, ugh, but whatever. So we were using the register control, which was the control that we saw in node modules. That's the one that comes with Strapi. So we created a custom controller called register user. I'm going to turn this one off because we're not going to use it. And the endpoint for this one, it's registered user. You got to remember that. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my Postman. And I'm going to make sure I change the endpoint to be register user custom, right? And so, and I already know from the start that I believe that this will let me update whatever parameters. And what I'm going to do, let's say I have the title parameter here. And for the sake of this example, we're just going to put web developer. But let's say that I don't want people to add that additional data. So we might have to refactor our custom controller to not allow us to do that. But first, we're just going to test it, make sure that our API is running. Oh my God, the dislike went away. Now I could go on living life happily ever after and not crying myself to sleep. Believe it or not, I take likes very seriously, and I cry myself to sleep when there's dislikes. But let me have some tea. And I know I'm about to get a bunch of dislikes because people want to see me cry on stream. It happens. It happens. And so now we had our... I realized I wasn't sharing the screen again. God damn it. Yeah, very similar to that. I like your example, like WordPress, and what's cool is basically that's what Strapi is going. They're going to create same experience but better, like WordPress. And there's some work to do in terms of the front end for marketers, because if you're a non-coder, you could definitely create pretty nice WordPress websites. But if you want to add additional because we talk about WordPress, someone smashed the dislike button. I'm guessing that's what it was. There's nothing wrong with WordPress, by the way. You don't have to smash the dislike button for WordPress. But the whole point that I'm saying is that now, like, if you wanted to, like, customize WordPress, you would, like, beyond what you're already able to do from the front end, you would still need to learn PHP. And for me, I much rather learn JavaScript and do JavaScript for everything. And as soon as I said JavaScript, thumbs up for JavaScript. I love it. Like, I love you guys so much. I love my community the best. You guys, the best community ever. So it's the similar idea, you know, exactly. So you, by the way, that's actually a great point. So Sharon, I'm not making sense right now. Sounds like customized child themes in WordPress so updates don't rank. That's exactly it. You hit it on the head. So in V3, the way customization worked, not quite as elegant as it does in V4 Strapi. So now you're able to, and as you could see, we have this folder extensions here. And this is where you would extend your code. And what it would do, it would not override. I mean, it would override, but it would not break anything. And so this is a great place to separate concerns and allow you to add additional customization or override customization by using the extension service. And there's other ways to do it as well, but because we're overriding a plugin, this is what we're doing. And they have a very specific file called Strapi server.js, and that's where you would add all your customization. And so if I go to the Strapi documentation where it says plugin and extensions, you could read more about it on Strapi docs. And again, worry about the big picture. Don't worry about too much, like whatever. The idea here is that we're hitting an endpoint. It hits a controller. Strapi gives you a way to override that controller to add custom logic. And basically, it shows the example where it shows this file where you put the name of the plugin. So notice you have extension, name of the plugin, Strapi server, and here in Strapi server, this is where you would write your custom code. And that's exactly the logic we're writing. If you could see here, we have our in sources, just like that documentation said, extensions, plugin name, Strapi.js, and in Strapi.js, this is where we're overriding our server. So now when I add that additional data right now, we should see this params here. And so, like, because this is the controller that we are calling. Hey, 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 hey. That makes sense, right? Hey, hey. And so in theory, this is where we should see our example. So let's give it a try, see what happens. So let me go make sure we erase all the users. Did I erase all the users? Users. Let's erase these dudes and do that, or however these identify themselves. And again, we're not even touching the front end. And the cool thing, when you're working with a back end, using something like Postman, like we're doing right now to test your API, is a really good idea. That was me hitting the dislike button. I reversed it, lol, just wanted to see you cry. I'm crying on the inside. But yeah, it's awesome. You guys play with my soul and my emotions like that. Anyway, so now we're hitting a different route. And this route points to our custom controller. So if you look in our code here, this is the way you would kind of set up the route. And notice how the route is auth local register user. And in Postman, that's exactly what we're hitting. So if I hit submit, right now it should
add all the data that we're passing. We're passing username, email, password, first name, last name, and title. You know what? I don't want the title to be in there, but for now I think it's going to be there, and I'll show you why. So we hit send, internal service error. That's even worse than before. Console log, console is not defined. Console. So you know what, guys? Console is not defined. So let's find console, because that's not even a word. So console is not defined. So let's just erase that because we don't need that console log there. We just need to see the params. The interesting here, validate register body. Here's another thing. We have validation auth and we have validate registered body schema. And so right here, I'm putting first name, last name, and I'm assuming that if I pass additional stuff, it should in theory throw an error. So in theory, so now I'm curious. Like I'm going on a tangent here, but it's okay. It's a good tangent. Because that could explain why the other one was letting us pass whatever data you want. So this is our auth controller. So we have this. We get the params. Where did I see that I was even calling that validation? Validation register body await. Oh, so this is kind of interesting here. So look at this. Validation register body, right? You see it here. This is completely useless, I think, because I'm passing the params here, but what the hell am I returning? So let's see, register body, call body schema, send email, validate callback, validation app schema. Is that even returning anything? I gotta look into how this works. But in theory, we should have either the shape is validated or it's not. I'm kind of curious now. I'm kind of going on the tangent. Maybe this is fine the way it works. But yeah, I misspelled console log. Yeah, Drisa, like I'm curious about that. And that could be it, because I have a vague memory that it wasn't letting you pass everything. And yeah, the patch came out, but I would double check. I'll double check that. But regardless, the good news that we know now is that we know that whatever behavior that control has, if you don't like it, we could override it. So that's awesome, because we did override it. Probably not, don't override it in node module folder, but override it the proper way that I'm showing you here. But I'm kind of curious here. Yeah, and I misspelled console log so many times. Yeah, if I had $1 for every time I misspelled console log, I don't think like validate register body like returns anything. But I have a feeling like it should. Maybe. I should probably like pull new changes for like pull the update. Console log. I'm curious. Because what's the point of having validate registered body unless it's working much differently than I assumed? So let's go back here. Make sure my server is running. So number one, we want to see if it validates. Number two, in theory, it should pass all this information in. Click send. As you could see, we get everything. We got title, we got last name, we got first name. And let's say we didn't want the title. We only wanted to limit it to first name, last name, username, email, password. So we'll fix it not to pass the title because we don't want it. Because you don't want to have your controller open to random data that shouldn't be there. Just because you can pass something doesn't mean you should, right? So let's kind of go back to our code here. And here's, let's see, username, params. I'm kind of looking here. What the hell did I put that test? Test. console log test params. Hey. So we hit params. So I don't think that one returns anything. So I'm gonna do more research to look into that. So note to myself. So here's like cool thing you could do. Like whenever you do code and you work somewhere and you're not sure of something, you should do like to do, not check if the email is already taken. Find out more detail about this function. I wonder if it mutates params, to be honest, because we're passing params and it's an object. I wonder if it mutates it. But whatever, we're still getting all the data. Yeah, so this is not it. So that does something different. So I'll have to look into it. What's cool when you do to-dos, and by the way, when you do comments, it's better to do to-do or something. Like stuff like this is okay if it's like not clear, but your code should be clear enough to be able to understand what it does, and you should not over comment your code. And if you do stuff, put like to do or whatever, note or something. What's cool about it, because what you could do is then you could do something like this and you could search to do. Like to do, like you don't need that. You could do to do and see, and then it makes it, see I have a bunch of other to do's here, right here, and you're able to find like things that you want to check or do or add or change. So I think that's like a good suggestion, is to be light on comments. Your comments should be like, I suck at this, I'm getting better, but you should write your code descriptively enough that you should read it like a nice sentence, that you don't need additional comments to explain unless it's not clear what is happening here. Like this could be called, is email valid? And then this would not have to be here. You know what I'm saying? Because that makes sense. Like if I, change that like that. But anyway, hope that makes sense. So now we know that validate registry doesn't do anything. That's fine. We're getting the params. We're getting all the data we want. And so in the simplest way, if I don't want that to be past that additional items, where is this code found? I'm looking in the wrong place here. Let's kind of exit here. We want to look. I opened the wrong file. It doesn't matter. We want to, but I want to copy this because I'm going to use this. We want to go to our custom controller. So in custom control here we are. Oh, and maybe that's why. Hold on, let me go here. It's inside Strapi servers. Hold on, let me double check something here. Validate registered body. I might have not put the console log in the right file like an idiot. So let me see here. Did I do it here? No, I didn't do it here. So actually, I wrote the this in the wrong file, the one that we weren't calling. So let me try this again. Test equals await validate. That's why it didn't come up, because I did it in a completely wrong place. So that's fine. Let's double check again. Just for sanity's sake, let me restart the server. Hey, Hologram, thanks for checking out. We'll see you next time. Yeah, guys, if you have questions, let me know. I'd love to answer them for you guys. So let me do a sanity check here. Erase all the users. Delete. Let's go to our postman. And so we're going to create a new user. This is going to register user controller. Click send. Sending. We get back Paul Bratt web dev developer. Let's check out our console logs here. Yeah, so test, like, so yeah, that function that I was looking at before works differently from what I thought. So let me, again, I should have added to do here. To do doesn't quite validate the params the way I thought. Find out more what this does exactly. All right, so that's fine. So for us, the way we're going to get the desired behavior here, we know that at the end of the day, we're passing our data to this get service that will call this add function, and it will add the data that we're passing to our database. So what we're going to do, we're going to pass user data, and all we want is username, password, email, first name, and last name. And so it will not pass the title information or any other additional information. So outside of this, it's not going to pass anything else. And I think this is a good way to do it, because you don't want people to pass data inside your controller that you don't want them to pass. Just the fact that you can doesn't mean that you should. And so only data we want is username, password, first name, and last name. And so right now, we're going to test it again for the last time here. Let me refresh this. Let me delete this. Okay, so our custom controller should not take any additional data. So it's expecting username, email, password, first name, last name, but it's not expecting the title. Even though we pass the title, it should not change the title here, right? It should not change it. It should be null because we don't want it to pass into our controller. So you're going to hit send. Internal server error. What did I misspell again? That seems to be common explanation here. Test is not defined because I removed it. So I'm pretty sure I have a console log somewhere. Yeah, so this console log doesn't exist anymore. So now it should work. So now, even though I'm passing extra data, web developer, the title, it should not be allowed. So we click send, and boom. Notice how title is null because it's not allowed. Even though I pass it here, it doesn't matter. So our user that we created has the first name, last name, username, and email. But here's an issue I have here. Why if I don't pass that data at all? Are we going to get any errors saying that that data is required? I don't know. Let's find out. And I have a feeling that validation function that I had tests if something is required or blank. But we're going to get to that in a second. So right now, I want to see what happens. Can I create a username without a first name and last name, which I shouldn't be able to do. So let me go back here. Let me erase this user again. And so I'm back here, blah, 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 blah. Click send. Oh no, you're able to pass first name and last name. That's also unintended behavior because I don't want someone to be able to submit the form unless they provide first name and last name. And so the issue here is that right now the backend allows us to do that. So we can write that check on the front end, and that's also good to have. But the most important place to put this logic is in the back end. And we're going to do like a quick and dirty implementation of that. And then we're going to figure out more of a elegant way of doing it. But so when we go to our controller here in our back end, and thank God we're using Strapi because I can't imagine writing all of this logic from scratch. So we are in our register user, and then the way this works, this might do whatever on the back end and pass something inside an object or wherever it is in context, and maybe this is a good place to check for the first name and last name. So we're gonna try it here in validation. And sometimes experimenting is what you have to do. So now a string email is required. So password required first. No, but see this again, that's required. But so I'm doing something wrong with this register body schema, validate register body. So I am doing something wrong. I'm missing something. Validate callback body. What does validate callback body does? Yeah, I have to learn more about this function. So I'm sure there's something I'm missing here, but we're going to do it another way, which is okay. That's the good news. When you're coding and you're looking at the code, you're trying stuff out. This is why I tell you, stop doing tutorials. Start messing with code. This is like, I'm learning so much right now. First of all, I'm making mistakes that I didn't know I was going to make. And then on top of that, I am finding out new things that I have to check. And so like, here's like a little pattern we could use here. And we could figure out what check we're going to write here. Inside here, we'll do like const has first name equals. Oh, thank you for recommending that. I don't know if that's a good way. Maybe that's a good check to check. And then has last name, right? And then we could literally follow this example, has first name. And there's a better way of doing this, right? We're going to say if this is not true, we're going to kind of do this way. I don't know if this is going to work, but this is why we try it, right? We give it a try. If has first name, wait, if doesn't have first name, hold on a second. I get confused. Has first name. So if first name exists, that means it's true. So if it's true, yeah, so this is fine. And then we have has last name. And then please provide a last name. Please provide a first name. In theory, this should work. We're going to check it out. We're going to check it out in a second here. So let's restart the server. And by the way, this is like why I tell you guys. Oh no, you guys, I'm so sorry, Sharon. Oh God, I'm so embarrassed. Better hide my face. How red it's showing. So Sharon, what I did here, this this did not exist here. So I'll show you what it looked like. Let me back up. So we didn't have a check to check if first name or last name exists. So what I did is I kind of used similar pattern like they have here. If there's no email or no first name, we're going to throw an error. And so that's what I did. So let me back up here and I'll walk you through the code. So basically what I did is basically check if params has first name value and it's not blank. And same thing, check for the last name. So if it doesn't have the first name, throw an error. And this should be, let me back up more. Oops. So if it doesn't have first name, please provide first name. If it doesn't have, please provide last name. And we're doing this check on the back end. And whenever you check in forms, I know when we work as front-end developers, we always write our checks on the front end, but you have to understand that's not secure. Either you, as a back-end developer, have to implement that back-end check as well, because the fact that you could prevent it on the front end doesn't mean someone can't use Postman to get past that and send the request. So the backend at the end of the day has to make the final say. So let's see if this works. Restart our server. And so now in theory, what should happen, I keep saying in theory, is when we fire this request, and let me just delete any users that we created. If I file that request, this should not work. This should have an error. I'm like holding my fingers crossed. Let's check it out. Send. Please provide first name. Yes. Hold on a second. Yes, it works. We we are creating our backend controller logic. And the beauty of Strapi, by the way, this is what I want to tell you guys, is look, I'm literally doing backend development with basic knowledge of Node, right? And this is amazing. This is so amazing because this is why I tell people like don't believe me. When people try to learn full stack, it is really hard to break into full stack development as a junior. It's almost impossible. That's why I just went front end. But the cool part here, with basic front end knowledge and JavaScript, you could start writing this type of back end logic by leaning on things that already exist. Like Strapi. I didn't write like half this code. And now what I have is I have this amazing backend that I could customize with basic knowledge of JavaScript. And now as I'm doing this, guess what I'm doing? I'm slowly learning more backend and getting more comfortable. So this is like a nice, easy transition, which as a front-end developer, you could be very productive by creating full-stack applications. And this is slowly teaching you how to work with backend. As you could see now here, we added our backend validation. So if you don't provide the first name or the last name, it throws an error. If everything is okay, nothing should happen, and it should go all the way to the end, and it should add the data. So let's do the final test. So now I'm going to provide the first name. Oh my God, where's the comma? We did it. That's going to be the first name. And so let me again delete any users that we may have here. Perfect. Yeah, it's like training wheels. And what I like about this, before you know it, you're like literally doing real backend development and feeling more comfortable. And that's why for me, it's like if you're a front-end developer and you want to make full stack application and you're not using Strapi, I'm like, what are you doing? Because like, I hope you guys could see how we spent the whole video today talking about backend development without being backend developers. Maybe some of you guys are backend developers, but this is awesome because we're learning so much. We're doing so great. And so let's do the final test here. So let's click send. And boom. Look, first name V, last name did it. We get all the data. If you try to pass additional data that is not required, it's not going to go through, which is amazing. And so let's check our database users. And what we got here, we got our user that we created. We got the name. We got the first name, title, invitation status, invite message. You shouldn't be able to pass it in registration, and you can't because that's how we customized our controller. So I think that is awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save these changes. I'm going to save these changes to my GitHub. And I made a mistake, which is not a big mistake, but I'm going to show you the mistake I made, guys. This is a very important one to remember, guys. So you guys might not see because I don't know how much I could zoom in, but I'm in the master branch. You don't want to develop features in the master branch because by accident, if you merge into master, that's actually what my deployed application is deployed from. So I might introduce break and changes. So what I have to do here is instead I have to create a new branch, and I'm going to do backend custom registration. I misspelled it at the very end. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the changes that I did, called message, custom registration, get push. Well, the easy way, just click this button. And so now I save this into a different branch. So I know that I'm not going to accidentally introduce any break-in changes. And once we complete and do the PR review, we're going to get it going. I know, Ancient Boy, I broke something and I didn't want to fix it in the middle of the stream. Oh, wait, what happened? I see. I might be able to fix it. There I am. I found it. Ancient Boy, by the way, I have a question for you. I saw you share your bug tracker in the private community that we have. That looks pretty awesome. You did a great job. If you ever want to come on stream and talk about it, or if it's okay if I talk about it, I would much rather have you, if you feel comfortable, join. I think you're doing an amazing job. You could tell us the stack that you did, why you decided, and you're literally like making some serious progress, which is fantastic. But so we saved it into our branch. We got our basic controller working with our custom controller. So as a review, what did we do today? Well, number one, we learned that whenever you start to code, there's always going to be some unexpected thing. For instance, today, the behavior that wasn't working before, which introduced the whole reason why I needed to create a custom controller to override something, was now working like I wasn't expecting. So I had to figure that out first. After we figured it out, we came to the conclusion that if you have a controller, it should only take the data that it needs, and it should not take any additional data. So someone should not be able to push data that's not required, right? Because why? You want to only pass the data that you need. So we only needed username, password, and email in that particular controller. So instead of using that controller, we created a new one. We override to add additional behavior. That way, the core controller of Strapi stays the way it is, and we don't have to worry about breaking it. And we created a custom controller, basically extended the functionality of our Strapi application, and we added the behavior that we wanted. So what did we want? We want when someone registers, they should be able to push their first name, their last name, their username, their email, and their password. And we did it. We got it working in our backend. So next week, what we're going to do, next week, we're going to come back, and next week, we're going to work on the front end. We're going to work here. This is almost done basically anyway. This is our front end. And then the front end, we're going to work to, where's our front end? Where's our front end? Here's our front end. In our front end, we're going to activate this form and make sure that we could pass the first name, last name, email address, and password. And that's it. And if someone tries to pass extra data using Postman, it's not going to allow. And we also added backend validation. For instance, if someone does not add first name and last name and they hit submit, the backend will be like, hey, that's not what we want. You need to add first name and last name. So we add that backend validation as well. So to kind of review, that's what we did. We worked on customizing and creating a custom controller with Strapi, which basically allows us to extend Strapi. And if you want to learn more, you could go to Strapi docs. They show a very good example how to extend plugins. They talk about the interface that you use. You basically go into extensions folder, you name your folder the name of the plugin, and you put your custom logic inside the Strapi server JS file. And that's exactly what we did. So if you look at my front-end code here, we went into our extension folder. So we didn't mess with the core functionality of Strapi. We instead created a new controller inside the user permissions plugin, which is the core plugin of Strapi. But using the extension, we are adding additional behavior rather than overriding, not even overriding, but actually mutating the actual code of Strapi. And so we go into our Strapi server JS file. This is what you see here. And this is where we added our custom logic or custom controller that is based on the register controller. We called ours register user, but it's based on register controller that you could find in Strapi. And the cool way, the way you could override custom controllers and services is literally by going into Strapi documentation, right? And looking up, you go to plugins. It could be plugins, it could be whatever. Let's say I wanted to extend, like we did, users permission. You go into users permission, server, you go to your controllers. We know we were working with authentication, so we go auth.js. We found the controller, right? And the controller that we found, it's register somewhere here. Line 277. We found this controller register. We copied it. We extended it. And we added additional code that allows us to control what inputs we're able to pass. So if you guys have questions, I do these live streams every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time, working on this project. We're working on React. We're working on learning about Node and Koa in context of using Strapi. And the reason why I use Strapi is because it's, so when I used to do WordPress, guys, there was this saying, why don't you use the 10,000 hour head start? Because that's how long it took web developers working on WordPress and created like that initial starter template for you guys being able to create something really quickly. And basically Strapi does the same thing. It's that 10,000 hours that you save by relying on Strapi rather than coding all that stuff from scratch. And so we're going to learn programming front end mostly, and like we spent actually a lot of time working on backend today in context of using Strapi. Number one, it's open source, just like you saw me looking in the Strapi code and finding the examples and showing you where you could find stuff out. You also saw, actually, pro tip today that you saw was really awesome, is that whenever you're stuck and you're working on stuff and you're trying to figure out when something is not broken in your code, you could actually go to node modules and try to find out where node modules, what code are you running, and test it there and see what issues you're having. So that was awesome. So man, that sucks, Engine Boy. But you know what? We could, we could chat like via text. And if you're comfortable, even if you can't come on a stream, I would love to showcase your application. So if you would be okay with that, let me know. I think it's really awesome. But you could tell, like, you know what? You could come on stream via chat. That's fine too. And we could like show off your application if you feel comfortable. If not, it's fine too. Because I think you did such an amazing job. I think it's good for people to see what type of stuff people are building. So guys, like my voice is about to go. I got to wake up super early tomorrow. But I'm back on doing these Tuesday night live streams. If there's one takeaway here, guys, the takeaway here is not me coding. It's you guys seeing me code, seeing that it's okay to run into problems, seeing it's okay to struggle, it's okay to get stuck, because you need to do the same thing I'm doing. Work on your own personal projects and not doing tutorials. Because the way I used the documentation of Strapi, the way I jumped into the code, the way I did all this stuff is very important for you guys to learn on your own through the struggle to be able to get comfortable with what you're doing. So with that being said, the last thing I want to say, without you guys, this channel would not exist. Like, I appreciate you guys so much. I love you guys so much. You guys are the best community. You're so positive, so friendly, allow me to, make mistakes, make a fool of myself online. And like, I love it. And what I want to showcase to you guys is that we all start from different spots in our lives. We're learning to code, and it's all okay. And there's so much negativity already in life that the best thing you could do is just be super positive and just be awesome like you guys are. So like, again, without you, I would be nobody, I would be nothing. So thank you so much for keeping me motivated. And I hope that I do the same thing for you. And Engine Boy, that'll be amazing. He says, hell yeah, 1000%. You could show it, and I'm available on text. Yeah, we're going to do that. That'll be fantastic. And so we're going to figure out a day and time to do that. And I'm glad you guys liked it and loved it. And like I said, I'm so glad to be part of your community. Really appreciate all of you guys. And with that being said, I'll see you guys on Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern time, where I talk about the soft skills of getting hired. And I also want to share with you like a couple of other things that are very important, and maybe more important than just learning to code on its own. And you probably know what it is if you watched any of my streams. And also, once my schedule evens out a little bit, I'm going to make more tutorials just on YouTube as videos, like short tutorials. So for instance, maybe I'll have a big live stream like this, which is cool, but it's hard to kind of use it as reference later. Maybe it's not, but what I want to do is I want to make some shorter tutorial videos of helping you guys, short videos that are right to the point that allow you to kind of learn a concept. And I'm glad that this was super awesome, just as it was for me. And Engine Boy, thank you. Sharon, thank you. Idrissa, thank you. Everybody who made it, thank you. And with that being said, you guys have a good night. I'll see you guys later.